This is Craig and Andrew, two Ranger qualified Army officers with MBAs, here to help you improve your business through leadership.
Each week, we'll deliver easy lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom on how to improve team performance. If you're a leader or want to be, this is the place for you.
Welcome to the cohort.
Disclaimer: the views in this podcast are those of the authors alone and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Army.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Command Post cohort.
Good morning, everyone.
Hope everybody's doing good this morning. I think we're going to hear an Army story from Andrew this morning and talk about how that relates back to leadership and some things that we can use in the business world.
Yeah, this is I guess all stories are personal, but this is kind of a meaningful one for me. But before I tell that story, I'm going to tell this other story, right? Because you always have to do that. You got to set it up, right? So I don't know how many Steinbeck fans we have out there, but in The Grapes of Wrath, there's a scene where John Steinbeck wrote about the main character. He was working on a vehicle, and the wrench slipped and cut his hand. And the character was talking to his friend and saying, and the friend was lamenting how he hurt himself. And the main character was like, well, it's all right, because whenever you're working on a car, at some point you're going to hurt yourself. So now that I've done it, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, so everybody just remember that. We're going to put a little pin in that as we go through this other story, my story. So in 2012, we were in Afghanistan. I was a troop commander there, and this was a pretty active, shall I say, some might say violent deployment, because we got shot at every single day. In my troop, there was 14 vehicles, 14 vehicle crews. Every single one got blown up except for one, and we just got more trucks. So we didn't just run out of trucks. So every single vehicle crew hit an IED except for one. I lost count after 22 Purple Hearts. I handed out, and when I say handed out, that's a pretty casual way of saying the actual event. But I say all that to say, this was a pretty active deployment. Now, in my troop, the history of my troop at that time, so I was in Anvil Troop, Alpha Troop of this particular cavalry squadron. So 3 or 4 commanders before me, we rotate out every about 18 months or so. So about 3 or 4 commanders before me was another Anvil Troop commander who deployed to Afghanistan and hit an IED, and he was killed in that event. And in that same deployment, the Bravo Troop commander was also killed. So the unit that I was in kind of had a history of taking on pretty difficult deployments. And so going into this deployment, right, my first deployment with this unit, and as the commander, I had that kind of weighing on my brain, right? That I knew the commander 3 or 4 before was killed by an IED in Afghanistan, right? And so we deploy and we get there, and like I said, every time we go outside the wire, every time we do an operation, we get in a firefight with the Taliban. Sometimes it's small ones, sometimes it's big ones. They adapted, we adapted.
Yeah.
We attack, they attack. It kind of, it's always changing nature. And so this whole time, I had this, in the back of my head that, the previous commander, or 2 or 3 commanders ago, was killed in IED. It was in November of that year, where I was planning an operation. There's one particular little village that was kind of down this little valley. That was that's where a bunch of bad guys were, and a bunch of supplies and stuff, and it was kind of a sticky wicket to get into. But we were planning an operation, really just kind of an observation, because the ridge lines that are around the valley kind of dominated it, so we could get on top of there and see down in there. So we'd been up there a couple of times, kind of do the same thing, but this particular operation we had planned, right? Well, we were going to execute it on this particular day, and something came up so that we had to push the operation 5 days to the right, or to the left. Later. We had to do it 5 days later. Yeah. So we weren't going to do it on the day that we'd actually planned it. We had to push it. So 5 days later,
Yeah, and that is something that happens with military operations a lot.
Mhm.
Is you're like you were just describing, the enemy gets a vote, and so
Yeah.
as you go about your operations, you're always having to react to a changing environment. So there's a lot of things that require you to shift your, whether it be a priority or just your timeline on things to
Yeah.
address those different issues.
Yeah. Yeah. So we pushed the operation 5 days, and then we started executing. My role in this particular operation was, I was kind of in the middle of the package. I mean, I was, the commander, so I was in charge of it all and leading it all. And I laid on A-10 Warthogs, and the JTAC was rolling with us, and so it's the Air Force um, attachment that would help us with the Warthogs. Uh, it was kind of a big event, right? So we started moving out that direction. We're going to roll up on this ridge line that kind of overlooked it, right? This particular place, it was pretty narrow. I mean, this was like a knife's edge kind of ridge line, right, with 1,000 feet drop on each side. And in hindsight, I realize all that now.
Yeah, the enemy does like to go to very inaccessible places and
They
make it
do.
difficult to get to them.
Yeah, yeah. So if we hit an IED, like, that truck was rolling down 1,000 feet. Like,
Yeah.
anybody in that vehicle that survived the initial blast would have been killed,
Yeah.
like, flat out, and buckled up all the safety precautions away, and
Hmm.
and it would have been a nightmare to get out. There's no way we'd have to burn the vehicle in place,
Yeah.
especially if it fell on the village side of the.
Yeah.
So it could have been. It was really high risk. So of course that's where I hit my IED. Yeah. So to this point at the deployment, like I said, very violent. Every vehicle had hit an IED and just replaced. One crew hit five. I had one vehicle
Wow.
crew that hit five IEDs.
Yeah.
We got shot at every single day. So, and then I had it building up right here. It's just a matter of when. Like, my previous commander was killed. Like, that's all these things were
Yeah.
going on in my head all this time, and then boom, it finally happened. Right. So luckily, it the IED didn't go off exactly properly, and it didn't do anything but disable the vehicle a little bit. Like, I got my bell rung a little bit,
Yeah.
but it didn't blow the truck off the side of the mountain.
Yeah, but not as catastrophic as it could have been.
Yeah. So at first, like, there's this initial shock, right? Like, holy shit, we just hit an IED.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we did. Is everybody okay? Yeah. Yes, sir. We're all right. Oh, okay, good. I guess we got to go check it out then.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We do. So I mean, like, I speak about that little funny part because, like, there was so much shock inside me, right? So much,
Yeah.
adrenaline, right? And I'd never experienced getting hit by an IED before, right?
Yeah. And I think that, that is something, in combat, especially in this, in the global war on terror, IEDs, they, experiences may vary. They were built by a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
And so there were different types of them, but there was always this thing in everybody's mind of like, if we hit one, what's it going to be like?
Yeah.
What is it going to do to the truck? What's it going to do to us? Because there are so many unknowns about it. And I think that that's something that, we all built up in our minds of, I don't know if anticipation is the right word, but
Yeah.
it's something where like you knew it was kind of hanging out there. And then what, probably also compounded that was, that the unit history there where you were,
Hmm.
of knowing that there was, historically killed in action in that same unit, that position. So after that, initial shock of it all,
Yeah.
and after you've, secured the area, checked on everybody, made sure everybody's fine, what was your kind of reaction there of after that kind of you had a second to get past that moment?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Kind of after my nerves calmed down a little bit, and I realized, it was all right. Like, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I'll be all right then. Okay, I was worried about this whole time. Now I've done it.
Yeah.
Now it happened. So
Yeah.
now I don't have to worry about it anymore. Thanks, John Steinbeck. Like, now, now I've done it. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. Right? It's like there's this. it's like because I'm thinking about it so much, because I'm focusing on so much, like I'm almost manifesting that I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm building it up so much that it became this big thing in my head, and you know,
And I think that's something we do as leaders is we do have these events that we're like, we'll focus on and worry about and be like almost a sense of like dread. And then after you've kind of experienced that, after that initial IED, you realize like, okay, these things are survivable. These things are, we can still observe this village. We're going to achieve our mission. We're going to disrupt the enemy here, still going to get everybody back. And there are ways to face these extremely difficult scenarios and still be successful. And so I think that is a mindset that leaders have to be aware of, because even if you're not in Afghanistan facing IEDs,
mhm.
this is still something that we face throughout in the business world. There are leader tasks that people are worried about, and they'll build them up in their mind. And until you've actually done it, the thing that comes to mind with me is like the first time you tell your boss no, the
Yeah,
first time you push back
yeah,
against a senior leader and say, hey, I disagree. I recommend we do this different course of action. When you're a new leader, if I said, oh, yeah, at some point you're going to push back against a senior leader in your organization,
yeah, yeah,
everybody's going to be like, no, Craig, that's crazy. That's catastrophic. They're going to fire me on the spot. They're going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. You build it up. You get all these horrible thoughts in your head about
Yeah.
how it's going to go.
And then the reality is as someone who has, offered resistance to my leaders, I can tell you that it's not catastrophic. Like, you have to articulate it and you have to bring those solutions, or you have to like explain why you're concerned about this, whatever. You can't just like, go about this willy-nilly, but you
Yeah,
you have to put in some work. But then you realize that it is not going to be catastrophic, that you can continue to be, value add to that organization just because you disagreed on something.
yeah. So like after we made sure everybody's okay inside the vehicle, we got out and like you said, secured the area and checked on the vehicle. So it did do some damage, but we were able to radio back to the next wave of troops that were coming in, and they brought a part out to us. So I was able to
Oh, wow.
fix it enough for us to get back. But like we continued the operation, like everything else went pretty smoothly. Like we didn't really get into much contact, and of course, nobody wants to shoot at us when we got A-10s in support. So
Yeah.
that helped. But we were able
Yeah.
to go on and continue the mission, and really, it worked out pretty well, and everybody was okay. So the event happened, right? This horrible things. I'm eventually going to do this. It's a horrible thing. All these things are bad things are going to happen. I'm going to. Well, then it happened, and it was really all right. We were still able to, we survived, and we were able to continue the mission and move on from there. So yeah, like you kind of have to have the courage to continue to face the situations and realize that it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, when I think back to like, my first IED experience or first time, you know, being involved with a firefight, it is a lot of times when people will describe leaders of like, hey, what's a good trait to have? And a lot of time you'll I think back to leaders that I've worked around who had that ability to remain calm
Mhm.
and that ability to continue forward through difficult situations like you're describing there. Hey, now we've got enemy contact, resistance. So even if that's not in a combat environment, even that's in business, once you walk into that difficult situation and everything and you're getting that resistance, we look for leaders to be able to keep that positive mindset of like, okay, we can still achieve our goals here. We can still work through this and solve these problems. But being from the the combat background, you mentioned Steinbeck. The quote that comes to mind for me, another literary great, Little Wayne. It's
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
it's got
Totally same. Yeah.
He's got a song where he says, shootouts ain't nothing but rock and roll to him. And so I think about, people that have been in those difficult circumstances repeatedly and they have that experience. They realize that, it might be loud, noisy, a little bit confusing at times, but it is not unmanageable.
Mm.
And so when you're looking at, I've got to go tell my boss no, or I just failed at something, or something that you've built up in your mind is something that's going to be potentially catastrophic, and you work through them. We talk about in leadership, like getting your reps in, and like it's a journey, and you get better at this the more you do it. Well, the more you experience these difficult challenges, you find yourself where then you become to where shootouts ain't nothing but rock and roll to you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, hopefully IEDs aren't the way it is in this. When you're working at going to your job every day. But like, sometimes that happens, right? Things like that happen. Bad things happen, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you do make a mistake, right? And it's gonna be awful. They're gonna fire me in place, right? Well, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works out. And you gotta have that courage to continue to show up and learn, right?
And I think, talking about making mistakes and how you think that, I'll definitely get fired. So there was a young chemical engineer who at his first job didn't mix the chemicals right and blew the roof off the plant, or the roof off a building. Well, that individual, you would think, well, surely he got fired.
Yeah.
Surely he didn't make it far.
Blew the roof off the building. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was Jack Welch, who went on to become the CEO of General Electric. And I think that's another good example of, those mistakes, or those things that, as leaders we'll be afraid to take risk. We've talked about risk on here before, and leaders have to be willing to assume some risk when the juice is worth the squeeze, when it's right.
Yeah.
But it's real easy for us to say, you know what, I'm going to play it safe, because if I mess this up, then I know I'm scared of getting fired, or I'm scared of what's going to happen. I'll get kicked off this project. But then after you may have, not intentionally, but with honest efforts, made a few mistakes through your career, you realize like, it's okay. It's all right. Like, mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
Jack Welch became a CEO after blowing the roof off a building. Not that I recommend that, you mix the wrong chemicals, but
yeah.
It's not always as bad as we think it's going to be sometimes. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a catastrophic event. But as leaders, I think we've got to, try to be the ones that keep that positive mindset, and also realize to not get too wrapped up in the fears of what could be.
Yeah.
And continue, like you said, you got to have that courage to keep moving forward. And even if you've made a mistake, it happens. And as long as you're not making the same mistake, or maybe it's you're fearing having that difficult conversation we've talked about. And after you've done it a few times and you've had to go tell Craig he's not meeting the standard, and this is what you're going to have to do, or you'll be leaving the organization. Like, now you do that a few times, and that's becomes less of a fear, or less of a concern about what those outcomes are going to be.
Yeah. So, something I just kind of thought about was, by nature of the role, leaders have to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Right. You have to believe. I'll even use the word faith, kind of take that out of the religious parts of it, but that things are going to be okay, or things are going to be good or better than where you are right now. If we do this, things are going to be better. It's going to work better. You have to have the belief, the optimism that whatever you're doing is going to work out better for the organization. And I think that's something that, I carried during that as well, right? Even though I had this fear, this dread about, I'm gonna be hurt in some way. I can just feel it. I also had to have faith that it was gonna be all right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, it kind of kept the operation going through the whole, deployment. So I think that's an important piece as well.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember. Wish I could remember who told me this, but I remember somewhere along my journey, somebody has made the comment that leaders are dealers in hope.
Oh, man.
And
Yeah.
that is really like a lot of times, like that's what you are, is you are dealing out, you're slinging hope. Like that's what you're doing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You were, because I think back to, times in the military where it is difficult and you're out there, what we used to call trooping the line. You're walking around checking on the guys that are out on the perimeter, and it may be 2:00 in the morning and raining and everybody's hungry and everybody's cold and tired.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do is just establish a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
So that, hey guys, the sun will be up here in about 2 hours. Hold on for 2 hours and it will get warmer. Now, what I may intentionally not mention is that right before the sun comes up, it gets really cold.
It's the coldest right before the sun comes up.
Well, we stay positive.
We're stay positive.
Yeah, we're just like, hey guys, the sun's gonna come up.
Yeah, yeah.
And so trying to deal that hope. I mean, I remember when we were in Ranger School, and sometimes you'd have to tell people like, they want to quit, and you'd be like, we'll quit tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll quit.
Quit when the sun comes up.
Yeah,
that was the saying. Yeah.
And then they'll be like trying to quit on, no, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you just keep pushing it back. And sometimes like to help drag somebody through those like challenging times, you gotta hustle that hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ranger School stories. I mean, there's nothing quite like when you, after spend a dark, cold night shivering next to, your best buddy over the next 2 months. All of a sudden you see those first couple of sunlight rays coming over the mountain. Like, oh man, maybe it'll be okay.
I might thaw out. It might just happen.
Yeah. So one last thing I want to mention. So, I told you we had to shift that operation 5 days. So it turns out the day we executed that operation, the day I hit my IED, was 5 years to the day when that previous commander was killed.
And that adds to that, that weight of, thinking about things like that. And that's something real. I mean, that's going to happen through life, is these historic events that where the dates line up, and it's not often, but when it does, that definitely compounds the weight of thinking about stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for letting me share that, Craig. That's a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you sharing it, because that is a very trying experience of, combat's one thing, but then anytime you're dealing with situations like that as a leader, dealing with an IED blast, and to have that, heavy weight of the history of that specific day weighing over you, and that really compounds all of that stuff. And so it's not just, it was like one thing you were thinking about. You had a compounding effect of all these things that stacked up there kind of going against you. So glad you were safe, and glad that, that mission turned out well, and you were able to get, you and your team were able to get back fine.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but definitely appreciate you sharing that. And hopefully, we were able to kind of articulate some value there of ways you can think about these things, and not, when you're facing challenges as a leader, how do you maintain that positive outlook and continue to push forward and be courageous and go through these times that are challenging, and realize like it's going to be all right, and you can do this. It's not the end of the world, so to speak. All right, we appreciate y'all, and we will see y'all next time.
Thanks, everybody. As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.